If you give victory to God, God will give victory to you. We have all these Muslims. I mean, if you look at what happened in the Ottoman lands that were defended, Mustafa Sabri says 2/3 of Ottoman history was defending other Muslims. 2/3 of their history. And then when the breakdown happens, they're betrayed by all these people. And now the Muslims are suffering from the effects of those betrayals. Nobody wants to deal with this fact. It's painful. You allied yourselves with the British, and look what you got. Sultan Abdul Hamid wouldn't give up Palestine. He was offered all the Ottoman debts would have been forgiven. And the famous letter, everybody knows about this stuff. He said, I can't give up. It's not mine to give. Can't sell something. It's a sacred trust. But people there were promised, oh, we'll give you your own country, get rid of these horrible Turks, right? Beware of white man speaks with forked tongue, right? That's what the Native Americans, you want to talk about promises from white people, talk to the Native Americans, right? Seriously, white man speaks with forked tongue. They're all snakes, sister. Yeah, you got poisonous ones, you got non-poisonous ones. So watch out. Yeah. No, that's... She's like shaking her head. Did I just hear that right? Yeah, no. There's good white people and bad white people. There's good black people and bad black people. There's good and bad. And then there's mixed inside the same person, like most of us. But don't listen to your enemies. Beware of Greeks bearing gifts. Right? You know, that's a Turkish saying. That must be, because they brought that big Trojan horse, right? That was in Turkey. They put it outside as a gift, you know, and poor Cassandra, given the gift of prophecy, don't bring the horse in. But part of the gift was the curse that nobody would listen to her. So he said, don't bring the horse in. It's a mistake. No, this is a gift. Look, they're finished. 10 years, we beat them. They brought it in. That's what has happened to the Muslim world. We brought in this Trojan horse, right? And what happens in the Trojan horse is that at night they get all drunk, they're celebrating their victory, and then the Greeks come out of the horse and then open the gates. And the Greeks come back and they wipe out Troy, right? Kill all the men and take all the women and children as slaves. So, you know, now it's the television. If you want a Trojan horse in the house, I mean, it's the television. Let me entertain you. I mean, you tell me one human being that if some creepy-looking stranger knocked on the door and said, you know, can I sit with your kids for a couple hours? I'd like to entertain them. What would that person in that house do? Seriously, what would they would slam the door, call the police or something. You know, there's some pedophile outside my house, wants to sit with my children. But people plop their children in front of televisions with perfect strangers. You know, I looked up a Facebook of a Disney cartoonist. Like when I was doing my research on Disney, I literally decided, hey, they probably have Facebook. I went to one of these guys' Facebook, and I swear to God, in his little, like, what do you do for work or whatever, he said, defiler of children. That's what he put as his occupation. Defiler of children. At least he was honest. You know. So the wa'ad is something, you know, but most of the wa'ad is about akhirah. So dunya, don't think it's all dunya. It's really وَهُوَ الْأَكْثَرُ كَأَوْصَافِ الْجَنَّةِ وَنَعِيمِهَا, like the descriptions of paradise. أما الوعيد فمنه تخويف بالعقاب في الدنيا ومنه تخويف بالعقاب في الآخرة وهو الأكثر كأوصاف جهنم وعذابها وأوصاف القيامة وأهوالها. وتأمل القرآن تجد الوعد مقرونا بالوعيد وقد ذكر أحدهما على أثر ذكر الآخر ليجمع بين الترغيب والترهيب وليتبين أحدهما بالآخر كما قيل بضدها تتبين الأشياء. So he says, as for the threat, it is to frighten people about punishment in this world if you do bad things, like لا تقربوا الزنا إنه كان فاحشة وساء سبيلا. Don't go near fornication. It's a bad thing. It leads to AIDS and syphilis and gonorrhea and all these horrible things. In dunya, there's a iqab in dunya. The Prophet ﷺ said, ما ظهرت فاحشة في قوم إلا أصيبت بأمراض لم تكن في أسلافهم. No sexual deviancy will manifest in a people except they will be afflicted by diseases that their ancestors didn't know about. So that's one of the punishments of zina. You're warned. And if you don't follow that wa'id, then accept the consequences in dunya before akhirah. This is why Imam al-Kandahari said that the Sharia is hujjatullah al-baligha. It's the clear proof of Allah. It's His hujjah. Because if you go against the prohibitions in the Quran, you will have horrible things happen to you. The Prophet said, don't go against your rulers. The Quran says, beware of disobeying the Prophet. You will be afflicted by civil strife and great painful chastisement. So if you go against your ruler and then all this horrible stuff happens, and why is this happening? قُلْ هُوَ مِنْ عِنْدِ أَنفُسِكُمْ. Say it's from your own souls. You were told not to do something. And then the Quran says, beware of fitnas. اتَّقُوا فِتْنَةً لَا تُصِيبَنَّ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا مِنْكُمْ خَاصَّةً. Beware of fitna, of tribulations, calamities, civil strife, civil war. It has a lot of meanings. Beware of fitna that doesn't just afflict the innocent among you, the guilty among you. In other words, ta'um al-adab. The fitna afflicts everybody. And the Mufassirun say, if fitna only afflicted the unjust amongst people, there would be no reason to do amr bil ma'ruf and nahi anil munkar. There's no reason to enjoin right or forbid evil because he's going to get his, just wait. But when you see people doing openly sinful things, oppression, and all these things outwardly, or sexual profligacy and these things, then you start thinking, if I don't condemn this, this is going to afflict me. So you're actually protecting yourself. Self-preservation is the first instinct. You're protecting yourself. And this is why the harm principle, John Stuart Mill's harm principle, doesn't work for Muslims. Because he has no metaphysical concept of harm. We have a metaphysical concept of harm. That if we allow these types of deviancies to manifest in a civilization or a culture, and we don't condemn it, then it's going to afflict all of us. We'll get the diseases that their sinfulness is accruing. They'll start afflicting our innocent people through blood transfusion or through other means. This is a reality. And it's not hatred towards those things. It's recognition of what these things mean to a culture and a civilization. They're dangerous things. And history shows that this is true. That's why the Quran is 1/3 sacred history. Look at the rise of people and look at their fall. They rise when they obey and stay within these limits, and they fall when they disobey and begin to transgress these boundaries that have been set for them for their own preservation. These are for their own good. وَأَمَّا الْقَصَصِ. As for the, and then he says, you will always find تَأَمَّلَ الْقُرْآنَ. Reflect on the Quran. تَجِدَ الْوَعْدِ مَقْرُونًا بِالْوَعِيدِ. You will always see in the Quran, if there's a promise, a threat follows. If there's a threat, a promise follows. That it's fear and hope. I've told this story before, but I was literally, I wasn't in the bar, but I was in a hotel that had one of those open sitting areas, and you could buy drinks or coffee. And this guy was drinking a Heineken beer and reading a translation of the Quran, which struck me as so odd. And I just said to him, he was sitting across from me, I said, how are you finding, I was in a suit and, no indication outwardly that I was Muslim. I said, how are you finding that book? And he looked at me and said, this is a very interesting book. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, how'd you come about reading it? He said, well, I'm doing business in the Gulf, and I thought, I should know something about their belief to read, and I've been reading it. And he said, this book makes a lot of sense. And then he said, it's very interesting because, it's always like it scares me, but then it kind of relieves my fears. It creates this tension. And I said, wow, you got that on the first reading? Like that's pretty impressive. So,